This is The Body's Compass with Matt Sorensen and today's guest, Kade Fallins. Cade is a men's work facilitator and co-founder of Sacred Adventures with his partner, Demi, which offer treks, pilgrimages and conscious travel experiences across Egypt, Bali and the Australian snowy mountains. Cade has helped thousands of people over the last 5 years through workshops, coaching, retreats, and now focuses his work on helping men lead their life and relationships from their own depths.
Welcome, everybody, to The Body's Compass. I'm your host, Matt. Today I'm with quite an interesting human being in Kade Fallins, as you heard in the intro. Cade, let's get straight in. I'd like the listeners to get to know you, so they've got a bit of a connection of who you are and how your background is going to influence your viewpoints on everything we talk about today. So can you share an overview of what has shaped you as a man and what led you putting so much effort into these sacred earth adventures?
For sure. Thanks for having me, mate, and hello to all your listeners. I guess if I'm answering that question, particularly you said what shaped me as a man. So there's something that comes to mind. There's two things that come to mind. So the first thing, without trying to let this go on too long, the first big thing that happened in my life was, well, prior to it, I was a very shy and insecure kid from a parents' divorce at 3 years old. So that really shut me down. You blame yourself as a child. You don't understand. So I lived like that for many years there. It was very sort of numb, cold, very insecure. I had a lot of self-doubt. So I didn't back myself and really saw myself as a problem. I wasn't enough. We're very typical core wound, right? And it's funny how you attract in life, not what you desire, but what energy you're holding. So then come to 10 years old with my mum and my sisters, we moved into a household with my mum's new partner at the time, who was a man who had some wounds that he hadn't processed himself. So he was an alcoholic, and he took that out on us and me particularly, physically. And in that time, in 4 years living in that household, I saw what the shadow of the masculine can do, how much destruction men can have on the world around them when they're not conscious of their actions. They're not taking responsibility for their past. So they're still living almost on autopilot to what they were subjected to. And so hurt people. And so we experienced that. And that actually cracked me out of my sort of numb and my freeze. I know that you're quite into the nervous system and being a Czech practitioner and stuff. I love this. I'm really interested in where this conversation is going to go, bro. So
find out
for
together.
Me, I was in a really frozen state for a long time, and I wanted to take my life at 14 years old. I was like, this just sucks. This cannot be, an existence. This isn't life. Like, why does anyone want to be here? And I was very isolated. It was numb. It was a gray world I lived in. 14 years old, I wanted to take my life. I told my mum, and she was always like on my side with things. So I kind of didn't want to do it because I didn't want to leave her in it. All right. And then around that age, something happened in that household which activated me out of my freeze. I had to protect my mum. Ended up in a very violent night. Police were there, and I'm like this little. I was really underdeveloped. I was very slow and late to bloom. So I was this short little 14-year-old. I'm 3.5 foot. I was the second smallest kid in my high school class of 200 kids. 200 boys, and I was the second smallest one. Picture that kid picking up a brick and hitting a fully grown man in the back of the head. And that was, what panned out that night was me coming out of that freeze and coming into my fight. And if you fast forward the next 8 years or so, I was very angry as a teen, got into a lot of trouble, yada, yada, the story. It led me to a moment in 2016. I just finished university somehow, and I was still on the same track. I had not taken any responsibility for my life. I was living, really avoiding the big things, avoiding taking responsibility and being in my power. I felt very powerless, very insecure. full of doubt, and I was riddled with this anxiety. My entire existence was clouded by thoughts of what other people were thinking about me or how I was going to navigate a situation. I would even remember I would be sitting at home and my best mates would be coming to pick me up in the car, and I'd be thinking, what are we going to talk about in the car ride? Like, it's 10 minutes. How's that going to pan out, you know? So I really relate with people who, still have a lot of anxiety and how crippling that can be, because it just doesn't give you space to think about anything productive, really. So finished university, didn't know what to do with my life, and I said, all right, well, I'll continue hiding and I will go traveling. So I went to Europe with my best mate at the time, and I don't know why I said that, he's still my best mate. And he's a bit of a saving grace for me, old Jordan. He took a year off his apprenticeship, and we said, we'll go to Europe and we'll do 3 months traveling, do 6 months ski season, and just have a ball. Well, 2 weeks in, I had a traumatic brain injury. I had this insane moment that happened that is just a complete miracle that I survived it. So there's a long story there, but basically we got to Eos Island, and at 8 p.m. on a ferry, went straight out drinking. They do the promotion where if you have 5 shots, you get a t-shirt, a singlet from the bar. So we collected all of the singlets that night. And by the end of the night, Jordan's passed out in our room, which is at the very back of our property. This property sprawled from the beach all the way up. It's called Far Out Beach Club. It's quite popular. Sprawls all the way up this mountainside, and our room was at the far right of this property. Jordan's inside, passed out, so I'm there. I don't remember anything, but we pieced it together. I've got shorts on and a wallet, and that's it. One of my shoes is in the tree, no phone, no shirt, other shoe, don't know. And there's a retaining wall at the back of this building. There's a little gap, and then there's our room in the second story. So I've tried to jump from this ledge up to the window. We diagnosed this from my injuries. I had a little cut here. So I've gone and grabbed onto the railing, and I've fallen backwards. I've hit the back of my head on that ledge. And this is 5 meters up at this retaining wall. And then I've fallen all the way down, tumbled, hit the front of my head on the ground, and was just knocked out cold. There's no one there, completely alone. I was there for a number of hours until a night security guard managed to find me. And the reason he found me was what really woke me up to there being a higher power involved in this grand orchestration of life. Because he told me afterwards that he goes to check that spot once a year. It's just some air conditioning vents. There's no need to go there. He was walking past our building, and he felt this urge inside him to go up there and look. So he goes up and he looks down, but he doesn't see anything because I'm right down the end. He turns around, and then he hears a voice inside him and another urge inside him, go and look down the end. So he walks down, he finds me, and then, the rest is, it was a bit of a saga. It didn't end there, but it continued for a while. So what that did for me was made me stop and pause and look at how I'd been living my life. And because I connected with death there, because I connected with the end, it connected me with the higher power. It was really my spiritual awakening moment where I saw that I'm a part of this whole grand orchestration, and there's a reason I'm here. If there wasn't a reason I'm here, then I wouldn't have been saved. Like it makes no sense. There had to be a reason why each one of us is here, as well as why I was here. So it put me into the grand picture of things, and also gave me a sense of, well, if I'm here for a reason, then I'm not going to waste my time. So I stopped all the drinking, obviously. That's the typical one, but I stopped running away from all my fears, mate. Like, I straight away did a yoga teaching course, and then started teaching yoga because I was so scared of public speaking. I was scared of heights, so I did rock climbing. I was scared of the ocean, like deep ocean. So I started doing ocean swims in Manly. Everything that I was scared of, I leant into. And that's when I found the ice bath. And the ice bath really helped me to step back into my power. and reclaim that
Yeah.
from the voices in my mind, which just talk me down from my post. You know, the real adversary, the real enemy is your mind. And if you can overcome that, then you're unstoppable. So yeah, I'll leave it there. That's really a story about, you know, the masculine side of things. Why I strive to be a good man is because I've seen the shadow side of it, and why I like to give men a sense of who they are at their core, because it gives you a better purpose than just like, I've got a job and this is my identity and this is my role. No, you're here for more than that. And it doesn't mean you have to be a coach and have to be doing workshops. It just means you're living from a deeper connection to yourself.
Mm. How old were you when the Greece thing happened?
So that was 10 years ago. So I'd say 24. Yeah.
24. So our lives have kind of paralleled each other, because I was living in Europe when I was 24 as well. I lived in Europe for about 5 years and certainly funded the alcohol industry there in every country I went to. But you were saying you were 3 years old when your parents divorced?
Yep.
Yeah. So my mum passed when I was 3.5. And that left me with like a similar, I always wondered why me and not her, which felt, I guess, as a young child and a teenager, makes you almost feel not worth it or not worthy, like the wrong person left type thing. But then as I was able to go through my own Greece journey in my own way, I realized that, well, if that exists, the opposite must also exist. So I'm here for something. So what an amazing soul contract that is, just like your soul contract with that security guard. And what that does to the mind as you grow up, especially the ego mind, because I guess the ego doesn't really form till we're about 21 years old. And we spend the first half of life building it up and the second half of life trying to obliterate it, which doesn't make much rational sense, but that's, we've got to transcend that thought sometimes. But it's quite interesting to hear you speak about that, because I was like, yep, been there, yep, done that, yep, was there, did that. So yeah, it was quite interesting. But you were talking about, the Sacred Earth Adventures. What was the moment that called you to create that? What were you feeling in your own body or your own mind that is like, yep?
Good question. I love that you say what happened in the body. How did you know? Because the body's intelligence speaks so loudly when you can hear it. The answer to that one, I'd started doing retreats prior to this, prior to Sacred Earth. And so it just sort of evolved into it. And I started doing retreats when I was doing all the workshops with breathwork and ice baths. And some of the retreats I was running were actually treks in the snowy mountains, mixed groups, multi-season, wasn't just winter. And so that sort of I was doing that with my friend Chelsea, and that was incredible. We had a great time, a lot of fun, a lot of really embodied transformation for people. And throughout the years, just kept going. And then I met Demi, my partner, who was also an avid traveler, was also living in her van, which she decked out even way nicer than my van, like completely trumped my van. And we met over travel. So the short story is that we met for 1 hour on the beach in Kira in the Gold Coast. And I was heading back to Nepal after ending up there serendipitously on my way to India and running into a Nepalese friend of mine. That's a whole story, but I used to work with a lot of Nepalese guys in the restaurants when I was managing restaurants. And I ended up in Nepal because India kicked me out because my visa wasn't ready. And I get there and then post a story, and one of the guys is like, "Oh my God, Paran's there." So I met up with Paran, and he's like, "You should come back. You should run trips here." So the universe really pulled me in there. It was one of those moments, I'm sure you resonate, where you think things have gone wrong. You've made a mistake. You've taken a wrong turn. I'm waiting in India like, shit, I don't have my visa yet. This is a problem. Send me to Bangladesh. Like, just get me out of here. And they're like, go to Kathmandu. I go to Kathmandu, and I'm like, man, the boys always wanted to take me to Kathmandu, and I never went. And now I'm here. And then suddenly Paran's just arrived there as well, and he was my number one boy. Like, we were just brothers, you know. And then he says to me, "Cade, what do you want to do with your year? Like, what are your goals?" And I was like, "Look, I'd love to take these retreats international." And he's like, "Well, my best friend's a Sherpa, and his dad's a world-class Sherpa. He's been a Sherpa for like 35 years. He's world-renowned."
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And that's when I heard the bell go. I'm like, okay, I got it. Went to India, did the trip, came back, met Demi. 2 weeks after I met Demi, she starts having all these dreams about Nepal and the Himalayas and India. And she's hearing things from people, from women saying India's not safe and, you know, having these bad stories. So she reaches out to me and goes, "Hey, tell me something good about India and the Himalayas." And I'm like, "It's amazing." And then we got to talking. That was literally, my response was just, "It's amazing. Why?" And then we got to talking, and she's like, "I'm having all these dreams about the Himalayas and stuff." And this was 2 weeks after we met, and 2 weeks before I was heading back to Nepal on a three week trip to just show up. Nepal called me in before. I was just going to show up, hike the mountains, meditate at the top, and say, "What do you want from me?" All right. Because to me, it's not just about what my mind wants to do. I don't just, you know, pick a country and say, "I want to go there." No, the country like invites me in. And that's what happened to Demi with Egypt. Egypt's very, like, it brought Demi in, and in her story, it brought me to her. It activated her and opened her up to then calling me in. And so then Nepal was my thing, where I'm sitting there and she's saying this, we're having this conversation over Instagram text, and I just said to her, "Maybe you should come and hike the Himalayas with me in 2 weeks." And she's like,
Nice
"Maybe I'll
line.
meditate." It was like the mind sidestepped. It made no logical sense. And we weren't like hitting it off. I wasn't like, "This is my one." It wasn't like all fireworks. But what it was, when I met her, I felt such a resonance from her. I just thought, I need to be around this woman. She's so radiant and she's so confident and independent, and she just holds this aura. I just want to be around her for some reason. But it wasn't like an instant, like, big chemical thing. It was more subtle than that. It was more soul led in hindsight. So I invited Demi to Nepal. We hiked the Himalayas. We did 3 weeks together, fell madly in love, of course. And what else do you do hiking the Himalayas with a world famous Sherpa than fall in love? So that was how it started. And then she was running a retreat in Bali 3 weeks after that. She asked me to come and help out. And then we just traveled for the next, on and off. I mean, still traveling. Like, yeah, she left her van in the Perth airport when she came to Nepal, and it stayed there for 9 months.
Yeah, wow. God, that must be a decent bill at the end of
Yeah,
that.
every 3 months she had to send someone over to pull it out and put it back in again.
Yeah. Well, Cade, you know, it's interesting because nature, you're talking about the mountains. I myself, I'm kind of more of a mountain boy. We just got back from Argentina. We, you know, spent a lot of time in the Andes and all that kind of stuff. There's a home residence there, but nature is made up of many different frequencies, all that resonate to our bodies, and even different tissues have different frequencies within us and resonate with different elements like water and earth, fire, etc. How, in your opinion, how does the earth initiate healing in ways that a clinic or a therapy room just simply can't?
Another good question. Big question. Look, I'm not a scientist, but what I do know is that we just feel better when we're in nature. And you see it with animals too. Like zoochosis is a symptom that animals get when they're in captivity, when they're disconnected from their natural environment, and they have symptoms that come up that aren't, you don't see them out in the wild. And, you know, there's a reel going around on Instagram at the moment saying that animals don't get depressed in nature, they get depressed in captivity. Where do you spend most of your time? And so to me, like, if I do look biologically, I know that like when my feet are on the ground and there's a moisture component between it, like when you're grounding and you want a moist conduit between you and the ground, you know, so wet sand, wet grass is the best, then your blood starts moving more harmoniously. It declutters, it declumps. And I've seen it on my own blood scans. So there's a more fluidity and flow through the body. And just even like for myself, I know that if I'm on my laptop for a long time, my head starts to feel like it's getting hot. My hands get hot. And I start feeling frustrated and uncomfortable and consumed by my mind. And then as soon as I get outside, there's a psychological thing that happens when you have vast open spaces. Like even if you look at like, you know, vagal toning work, when you look into your peripheries, you activate a safety mechanism in your mind where you go, oh, okay, it's safe to look out here. I don't have to tunnel vision in here because there's a threat. So when you get out to say Kosciuszko or like Argentina sounds amazing. I'd love to get down in the Andes there. When you have this vast open space, it allows the mind to be clear and free. Like there's a straight correlation between those two things. So yeah, you've got like, you know, fresh air and the minerals and the, like in Bali, they say that the air, there's volcanic, resonance or like ions in the air. So it's very grounding because there's this like, you're actually breathing it in. It's the same with being in the ocean and feeling the fluidity. It's like getting connected to something so much bigger than yourself that you remember that you are just a tiny part of this whole equation. So it takes away fears, takes away the doubts. You go, well, if I'm just this little part, then, you know, my worries are not that big and my fears are not that big. And I can just go out, and it just gives you this humility to move forwards.
I think that resonance, I mean, we are nature, right? So in a way, it's just, when you go outside, it's like going home, because you think of the elements that make up a human body: earth, physical tissue; fire, metabolism. We're made up of anywhere between, depending on what book you read, 55 to 99% water, and we all breathe. So when we're breathing the air, it becomes us. When we drink the water, it becomes us. Yeah. So there's that resonating factor. You were talking about the animals in captivity. I remember reading years ago that a lot of lions, I can't remember what country it was, but all the lions were getting sick, and they were being fed like grain-fed steak, essentially. And of course that's going to get a lion sick because they're not designed to eat that. But we're in this environment where we're full of EMFs and light pollution and air pollution and just, I mean, what we've done to the planet, we are good at messing things up. But then going into that resonancy with, I remember when I was in the Andes, a thought came to me in that moment, like, this is like billions of years old. Like, imagine the wisdom if that mountain could talk to me. And I know the mountains in the Andes Mountains speak Spanish, obviously, but it was like, God, if you could tell me a story, what would you tell? And, you know, once that mountain was probably at the bottom of an ocean at some point. So the tales of growth just in that was a massive, just sit still, essentially.
Yeah. It's
Cade,
like just
I
looking
see a
up
lot
at the
of
stars. Oh, sorry. It's like just looking up at the stars, and puts everything in perspective, and it allows you to calm down and just be grounded in yourself. Yeah, I love that so much. We are nature, of course. And so when we get into the environment, that which we are, we're happier, we're healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. Cade, I see a lot of people that come to me for a myriad of reasons. One thing I do recognize is that they seem to navigate towards like a balancing element. So someone who's burnt out, they start to crave the ocean or they need to drink more water, just as an example. What happens neurologically and in the body when someone steps into that sacred landscape that you've seen in people change physically and mentally?
I think it really comes down to that nervous system first, which to me is the first point of call when we're looking at transformation and change. Like I call it getting clear. You know, you just, when you're in a hyper aroused state, you're not going to get connected. It's just not safe to. So as to what we said in that last point, like you get into this vast open space and you talk about like a sacred landscape, yeah? So you're talking about places that hold a potency of energy, you know, because the earth is an organism just as we are. So I liken it to when we have an energetic imprint of a moment, you know, good or bad, traumatic or really positive, then it gets stored in our body. Or earth does the same thing. So when there's a lot of ritual and ceremony placed in a space, in an area, we call it sacred. And so those places hold an energy because people have poured intention there for thousands of years sometimes, tens of thousands of years sometimes. When you talk about Egypt and, you know, what's happening there, we don't really know. And so you walk in there and like, that's why travel is so amazing, because you go into these places and you just immerse into the energy that you just cannot access as potently if you're sitting there and, you know, as you said, like in a therapy room or, even just, you know, visualizing or anything. Like they can all be powerful, but it's not as palpable as going there physically and being in these spaces. And I've seen incredible things, and that's, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but that's why we do what we do now, because I went through a lot of like the really psychological work for a while with people and yada, 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 doing all of that modalities. And then I got to the point where I realized that the most powerful thing is just getting people out into nature in a good context, in a good container or with an intention with good people. And then you let nature and life do its thing, because it's going to bring up shadows, it's going to bring up mirrors and reflections and insights, and it all just happens naturally. So really, it's like stepping aside from being the one doing the thing, like the guide or the leader or the coach doing the thing, to saying, I'm holding this, I'm here for you, but call it God, call it consciousness, is here, and it's going to work through us all right now. So if we were in a group right now, then you would sit there and you would just say something out of nowhere to someone else, and you wouldn't even know that you're saying something that is so potently, profoundly powerful for this person. So it's like God speaks through all the people in these groups and these containers. That's kind of gone off topic a little bit, but yeah, it kind of answers the question around the sacred landscapes and stuff. There's a potency there, and we talk about ley lines and edited grids as well on this earth. Like there's just like we have a electromagnetic field around us, so does the earth. There's different ley lines and meridian points on this earth which are particularly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Earth even has acupuncture points and chakras and overlapping electromagnetic fields, which resonate to our electromagnetic fields. And, you know, going out into the trees are the Earth's lungs. The rivers and lakes, they're the vasculature of the Earth, and the soil is really the digestive system of the Earth. So it's really hard to separate a human from the Earth in many sense. So it really is just like when you're doing these trips, it's kind of like going back home. It's tapping into that real tribal, primal part of you that seems to kind of, it gets a little bit diminished in our day-to-day mindset of we have to work a job that we hate to get all the money we don't really need, to buy stuff we don't want, to impress people we don't like. And that's most people's record that they keep playing. Plus you add all the stuff that's happened to them in their life, which they haven't really sat with yet. And they haven't synchronized that. When I say synchronized, they haven't bought, for every trauma there has to be what would be the opposite of trauma? A healing. For every trauma there has to be a healing. For every left there has to be a right. But to heal that effectively, you've got to be in synchronicity with both those polarities. And I think what you guys are doing with the sacred adventures is really bringing that to people, whether they're kind of conscious of it or not. But as you were saying, the people that go into that with you, there's something in them calling them to that as well, which is part of the whole experience. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you're talking about an inner union. Create the unification of poles and sides of things, instead of living in the left and the right, the good and the bad, the this happened, that happened. Because it creates like this loop. Like sometimes we get caught in this, like the victim, perpetrator, savior loops. That's a triangle in that one. But when we can just try to find acceptance and peace and union within these things inside of us, then the whole journey gets quite simple, and it should get more simple. But a lot of the time, I know for me, it's felt like, and sometimes does still feel like, it gets more complicated because you add on more inputs, the different modalities, and Instagram's telling us you got to be doing these thousands of things to help yourself. And they're great, but they're not the destination. And that's where I think, I mean, something you said before, just about the state of, humanity and the impact we're having on our beautiful planet. It's kind of naive what we're doing. We're not really actually connected to what we're doing. And if we were truly, I think we'd stop. But people are so caught up in a rush to get towards some invisible goalposts that they've inherited from society. They're not even theirs. But this capitalistic sort of culture where we're just rushing. We're just rushing to
the
get
funny thing is, we're actually rushing to do nothing.
Yeah.
We're trying to look really busy while getting very little done.
Yeah.
That's kind of the irony of it. But there are, just on that, there are countless people out there who feel, really lonely or isolated, regardless if they're in a relationship, as an example. So when you're on these experiences, why do strangers become family so quickly on these pilgrimages?
It starts with the intention. You've said it before. People have an intention. They say, I want to do this thing. So what we do as the space holders is you set kind of a standard. And so then if everyone wants to come, whoever wants to come is agreeing to like come to this standard of like, I want to be joined by this intention to better myself, to connect with the earth, we create a mini culture, because everything has a culture. So they step into a different little culture or context. And so the context is set. And look, I think that deep down, everyone wants to connect, even like myself when I was younger, I was craving it, even though I'd push it away. And so we get really good at wearing these masks and, pretending to be, not everybody, but a lot of us do pretend to be someone and sort of hide the parts of us we might be ashamed of. But when you come into a group where people are leading by sharing, things about themselves and their stories that might be seen as, weakness or softness or these sorts of things, when people start opening up and revealing themselves to other people, it gives permission, of course, for them to be shared. And when someone's been living their life and they've lived on the surface with their friendships, then there's a subsurface layer that only they inhabit. So they feel isolated and lonely because no one really knows the true them under the surface, because they've never let anyone in. They're wearing this mask and they think this is who I have to be. And I mean, point it towards men's spaces. A lot of guys are doing this, because we've grown a culture where we've got to have it all together. We've got to have it all figured out, be good all the time. And we can't show this weakness, which actually takes courage and bravery to share. So it's a bit of a paradox there. So when someone comes into an intentional space, says, yeah, I'm going to join this culture, this context, they go in there and they see other people doing it. So then slowly they lower their guard, take the mask off and put the armor down. Once you share yourself at that depth and you get seen and held in that, that's deep connection. You go, shit, someone's actually seeing me and likes me for who I really am. Now I feel safe. Now I feel connected. There's more to that as well. There's more like also the in these group environments, you got the changing environments. So you're moving around. There's different stimuli happening. And the point of that compare it to a therapy room, the point of that is that it brings up different things inside you. So the raw material of life is the teacher, is the mirror. So instead of a therapist saying, hey, can you hypothetically tell me about your past and what would you do in this situation? Instead of that, we put you in a real life situation and something comes up inside you. You go, shit, I'm feeling this fear. Oh my God, I'm hearing guys, I'm scared to share this thing about myself, or I'm just judging myself. I think you guys are way better than me, whatever it is, and it's not always so contrived. It just happens naturally when people are free to share. There's no judgment. It's just everything's welcome. When people get into that situation and there's changing environments and it's revealing different things about themselves, they get to learn and they get to see themselves in the mirror of life, of the raw material of life. And then it's not connected to a modality and a therapy room. It's connected to living. And so the identification of being in the healing journey and the healing trap, sometimes I call it that because people get addicted and identify with being spiritual and being in the healing trap. Whereas if you can be identified with the adventure of life, I think that's okay. That's a good identification to have.
And I think a lot of men, they're trapped between, especially kind of our generation. We grew up, the man has to be the provider. The man has to be ABC. I remember showing emotion as a child, and I know politically incorrect, but got called a fag, right? But that's, I was a product of the environment I was in. So I was conditioned to not really show emotion. And if I did, then I was labeled something that was back then considered a mental illness, right? You've got that kick-ass have to be this versus now, if you are that, especially if you're that too much, that's now labeled as toxic masculinity. And a lot of guys don't know how to navigate between those two poles. And I think there's a time and place for each one. But as you were saying, it's being in that environment to actually be themselves. And they're likely on these retreats being themselves probably for the first time ever. And I find when I'm working with a client and I'm probably very slowly moving away from the hour by hour appointment type model, is that I can spend an hour or several hours with someone. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a clinic room. We can be on the beach, we can be out in the bush or wherever. But then at some point they have to leave that therapeutical setting and they have to go back to their life and back to their real world. So it's the integration of that as well. And, you get the Instagrammers saying, you should. Now I hate the word should. It's one of my things. I just hate the word should. As soon as someone says, oh, you should, I'm out. I've clicked. You've lost me. but then they take that because they don't. A lot of the kids, a lot of the men even, we don't have wise elders in our culture, in our society. We don't have, I mean, they've all been silenced during COVID, but that's a different topic altogether. We don't have that to look up to anymore. And our parents likely, they're stuck in that. I know you know exactly what I mean by that, which is kind of outdated software in many kind of situations. But I find the young men that I see clinically, they're stuck in a certain paradigm. And that paradigm works for a while.
No worries.
Take 9 or 10 now, whatever we're up to. Thanks for hanging out with me while we get through this technical fun stuff. While the tech gods get recording, I don't know how long we're going to have. The next question. We spoke a little bit about how different people have different connections to different lands. You mentioned Egypt, Peru, Nepal, Bali. What does each land carry for you, and what do they have that the others?
Great question. So the first thing that comes to mind is that the reason I think these places, any place, is so potent and what we get from it is you really step into their connection with God, creator, life, universe. So you go to Nepal and you get their connection with God. You go to Peru, same thing. Egypt, same thing. So it's kind of like you have these different access points you get to try on. And then you get to go home and you've got multiple different feelings and avenues by which you can connect with the greater intelligence beyond us. So that's the broad answer. And then on a specific level, this is just, in our experience and what we've had, and other people will probably have different experiences. But for example, Egypt, it's a really masculine and feminine energy there. So what that gives us is that the duality, that polarity, which comes into the Holy Trinity. When we bring it into divine union, we have the monad coming into the duad, which forms the triad. So the masculine and feminine coming together brings us into that sort of union. And that's what it feels like there. A lot of the people that come on our trips will be women, and they'll be healing their masculine wounds, which helps them to open up how they receive from that masculine energy of God, right? They've done the feminine work, the womb work, the feminine embodiment work, but they can still be blocked up in how they receive from, life. And so going to Egypt is very much around that masculine side. And then for the guys that come on board, I see that the guys they just happen to be at, I don't want to say it's like an absolute thing or it's exclusive of other guys, but what I've seen in my experience is that the guys that come are in a deep reverence for the feminine already. I haven't had any guys come that are like, still disrespecting women and, holding vices and shame around how they show up with reverence to the feminine. So that's Egypt. Peru. Peru feels like a really earth-centered Egypt. It's got the ancient feel to it. It's got these really old sort of structures and developments, constructions, and it felt really connected to earth and the elements and nature. Nepal, similar to that. What we get from Nepal is it's really heart-centered to me. It's like you've got the Buddhist culture there, Hindi culture around there as well. You got the Tibetans just across the border, which a lot of them have fled into Nepal. And what you get there is this heart-centered humility. It's like they say that acronym of Nepal, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Nepal, Nepal, never ending peace and love. And so it's this really beautiful, happy place. And the reason that I've seen that I believe they're in such a happy and present place is, well, A, when people don't have much, they get connected to themselves and they're grateful for what they have. Whenever we've been stripped away of everything in our lives, as we've said in our stories, that's when we've grown appreciation for what we do have. It's that, juxtaposition of polarity. Then the other thing that's cool about Nepal is you got the most impressive, powerful mountain range in the world. The Earth's crust is impinging and pushing up further and further every year. Like Everest is still growing, right? These continental plates pushing up so much of Earth's energy up there. And in the foothills, you've got the Nepalese people who are the most humble people I've met. So it's in the presence of a greater power and being connected to the monstrosity of nature that you get humbled in Nepal. So hiking those Himalayas, it's a very beautiful journey of the heart, of uncovering grief and getting connected to that love and presence and peace. So yeah, that'd be my take on those places.
Yeah, I get from Egypt and Peru, a very mystical, almost otherworldly vibe, if I want to call it that word. Almost like connected to our ancestors in the stars type thing. That's what comes for me. I haven't been to Nepal. I know you've done a few trips to Bali. Every single attempt I've had to go to Bali, it hasn't worked out for whatever reason. Last time I tried was with an ex-girlfriend of mine, whatever year that was ago. Like a mountain volcano erupted in Chile, I think it was. And that delayed the flight. And long story short, we couldn't end up going. But it's like the universe doesn't want me to go to Bali just yet for some reason. But it's interesting how we get called to go to certain places as well. But not only certain places within the places. And Cade, we certainly live in a unique little spot in the entire universe. And it's so unique. So far, we can't find another one like it. And through your time doing these sacred adventures, what Earth taught you personally that you couldn't have learned anyway?
The adventure of life, hey? What I've learned from Earth and observing Earth, particularly like I did a vision quest where you sit out for 5 days, 5 nights, fast from everything familiar. And it's a really beautiful chance to observe yourself and, of course, observe Earth and nature. And what I realized there is that I really got to experience how people say that nature is never in a rush. Nature is never trying really hard, but yet everything gets done. Everything is in perpetual progress. Like transformation, like we chase transformation and change, but people chase it like it's a one-night stand. They go and do a breathwork workshop and they think, I've done it. I've done some therapy sessions. I've done it. But we need to be in aligned with the perpetual transformative nature of nature. It's always moving gently. It's always changing and evolving. And so within that, you can see how to orient yourself for myself. Like, you just put yourself on a roller coaster, play the long game, but within that as well, to not get attached to things, because I've seen that impermanence is the only inevitability. And I ended up getting this, like saying, tattooed on my arm here, which is Panta Rei, which is from ancient Greek. It's a philosopher, Heraclitus, And he said, he's had this teaching around Panta, which is that, the inevitable impermanence. Nothing lasts and everything flows. Everything's going to keep on moving. So if you get attached to things in nature, it's like the tree's going to fall down. It's going to get burned, but it's going to spring back to life again. So there's a constant cycle we're involved in. Being in acceptance of my own cycles and my own rhythms, my own seasons has really, I'd say that's what Earth has taught me the most, for sure.
You certainly have to be in sync. The more out of sync we are with solar, and we seem to get. And I know there's more and more medical products out there to try to combat that. But good luck. Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you, patience with all this lovely technology fun we've had this morning. As we finish, feel free to share and people can find you or services you offer as we close out here.
For sure. Thank you so much, Matt. It's been a pleasure. I love what you're doing here. I love the nodal point that it revolves around, and it's very resonant with where I'm at too. And I just wanted to also mention that therapy rooms and all of that kind of work is amazing, and it's all a tool and it's all part of it. I don't want to be sitting here saying that that's not beneficial or not useful, because I do one-on-one work with people as well. I work online. I coach guys. I put them into programs where we're doing things together, in small groups for periods of, 3 months. And with that, the takeaway is that this journey isn't linear. It's not like just fix your nervous system and then you go to your psychology. It's like you're constantly orbiting around these things, and you pick up something and then you let it go for a while and then you pick it up again. So, on the trips, as we're out there and we are learning from life, it's so much of what people have already experienced in sessions like this and podcasts, and what they've learned from people, that they're all the seeds that are planted that allow them to then embody it, to anchor into their lived experience, which is the end goal for me. The end goal that keeps on moving is anchor it into the physical experience in who you're being, and helping people or reminding people to come out of the mind, because the mind is always going to be in a rush chasing dreams and goalposts. It's never going to end. So it's good as a tool, but just being able to anchor things into the lived experience here, that's the goal. And so we get clear, we do the trips. So where you can find me is out in the snowy mountains doing the men's hikes, which we do in winter. So there's 2 of those coming up. Taking men out for 4 days, snow camping, trekking, big challenge, really beautiful space away from everything that you talked about, phones, devices, roles, jobs, families, all these things, stripping everything back so they can get into connection with the wild man within, their true nature, their core, and then they can lead their life from that place. And that's where we feel, more purposeful and more fulfilled with our direction. So that's what I do with men in the treks. And then of course we've got the trips through sacredearthadventures.com is our website. And then one-on-one and group coaching programs for men revolving around, getting in connection with true nature and getting clear, and then building the tools in order to align themselves with a higher vision of themselves, rather than just the mind or other people's ideas that they've collected throughout their life. Because as I see it and as I experienced in my life, I didn't live for myself for a long time. I didn't have my power. And so it's really about giving men back their power from the past, from the vices and devices and addictions around them, so they can lead a fulfilling life that has a good impact on the people around them, the people in their families, the people in their workplaces, and everything in and far between. So that's where you can find me on Instagram, Kade Fallins, sacredearthadventures.com. And I'll be out in the mountains somewhere.
Beautiful. Out in the mountains like a wild man. Love it. Well, thank you for hanging out with me today, and certainly appreciate the work you're doing. I think it really is needed, especially, well, I was going to say the younger men, but the elder. I think it's really nice and refreshing to know that someone like you is leading that for men out there. So if you get called or feel the pulling towards one of these adventures, you know where to go.
That's a wrap for The Body's Compass with Matt Sorensen and today's guest, Kade Fallins. If you want to find out more about Cade Chicoat-Suarez, check out his Instagram at Kade Fallins or his website, sacredearthadventures.com. If any of this episode resonates, share it with someone it might help. If it helped you, come back. Before you go, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating and a warm review. It helps people find the show. Until next time.